Picture a door. Not a castle gate, not a bank vault. Just a plain wooden door on a plain American house. 4 panels, a little scarred at the bottom where a dog has been asking to come in for 11 years. Now picture something strange about it. There is a hole bored through it, about the size of your finger, a little above the latch, and hanging out of that hole, dangling down the outside of the door where any stranger walking past could reach it, is a leather string. Pull the string and the door opens. That's it. That's the whole security system. Anyone on the road, a neighbour, a peddler, a man you've never seen in your life, can walk up to that door in the dark and let himself into the room where your children are sleeping. Now picture the same door 200 years later, same 4 panels, same dog scars, but now there's a brass cylinder in it and a second lock above the first one, a deadbolt that throws an inch of solid steel into the frame. There's a chain. There's a peephole with a fisheye lens. There's a sticker in the window telling burglars the house is protected by something, and a light over the porch that burns all night whether anyone is coming or not. Between the leather string and the deadbolt, something happened to this country. Tonight, we're going to find out what it was, and when. Because everyone thinks they know this story. Everyone's grandmother said it. We never used to lock our doors. Nobody locked their doors back then. You could leave the keys in the car, leave the house wide open, walk to church, and nothing would happen. And here is the strange, uncomfortable truth we're going to spend tonight walking through. Your grandmother was telling the truth, and she was also wrong, both at the same time. Some of the unlocked past really happened, and it's documented, and we'll stand inside it. And some of it is memory doing what memory always does, sanding the fear off the past until it feels like a warm kitchen. I'm going to tell you which is which, every time. That's the deal for tonight. When something is a hard fact with a date on it, I'll give you the date. When something is an estimate or a legend or a feeling the country had about itself, I'll say so plainly. A story about trust ought to be honest. One more thing before we start walking. The doors in this story are real. The locks are real. The patents are real. The panics and the newspapers and the murders are real. And every date I give you is a real date. But the hands I'm going to lend you, the fingers that lift the latch in 1755, the fist that throws the bolt in a Manhattan tenement, the woman standing at her screen door in Kansas, those are borrowed eyes. Composites, stitched together from the kinds of people the records tell us were there, so you can stand inside the rooms instead of squinting at them through glass. The rooms are true. The eyes are on loan. I'll always keep those two things separate for you. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who like drifting off to the sound of strangers' deadbolts clicking shut in the dark. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Check your own door if you need to. I'll wait. Here we go. The cold wakes you before the light does. That's how it works in this house. The fire burns down to a red memory of itself sometime after midnight, and the cold comes in through the chinking between the logs, finds the gap in the blanket at your shoulder, and settles there like a hand. For half a second you don't know where you are. Then you hear the wind working at the roof shakes, and you smell the room. Wood smoke gone stale, tallow, wet wool. The warm animal smell of 4 sleeping children in one bed by the far wall, and under all of it the sharp green smell of the forest, which never entirely stays outside. Welcome to the Pennsylvania backcountry. It is 1755, it is late October, and you are 4 miles from the nearest neighbour and about 200 miles, in any direction that matters, from anything anyone in Philadelphia would call the law. You're a woman of 34. You came over the mountains 3 years ago with your husband, a wagon, 2 oxen, an iron kettle, and a Bible with a brass clasp. And you've spent every day since then learning what the word alone actually means. Not lonely, alone. There is a difference, and the difference is about 4 miles wide. You slide out from under the blanket without waking your husband, and your bare feet find the floor. Split logs, adze smoothed, cold as creek stones. You cross the single room of your house in 6 steps. That's the whole house. 1 room, 16 feet by 20, a loft above for the older boys, a stone hearth, a table your husband made, the big bed, the small bed, the chest, and the door. Stop there a moment. Look at this door with me, because this door is the reason we came to 1755 first. It's heavy. 2 layers of riven oak plank, the outer layer vertical, the inner horizontal, pegged together so an axe can't split it along the grain in one blow. Your husband built it that way on purpose, and we'll come back to why. It hangs on iron hinges that cost more than the door itself, because iron out here is worth roughly its weight in everything, and it fastens with a latch. A wooden latch. A bar of white oak about as long as your forearm, pivoting on a peg, dropping into a notch on the frame. To open the door from inside, you lift the bar. To open it from outside, you can't touch the bar. The door is in the way. So there's a string, a leather thong tied to the latch bar, threaded out through a small bored hole above it. Anyone outside pulls the string lifts the bar, the door swings open, which means the whole security of this house, the house at the edge of the world, the house with 4 children asleep in it, comes down to one question. Is the string in or is the string out? At night, you pull it in. That's the ritual, the last thing done before sleep, as fixed as prayers, fire-banked, candle out, latch string in. With the string pulled inside, the door cannot be opened from without. Not quietly, anyway. A man could still chop his way in, which is why the planks are doubled. But he can't lift the latch. The string is the lock. And in the daytime, and this is the part your great-great-grandchildren will find hardest to believe, and the part that is absolutely documented in 100 memoirs true. In the daytime, the string hangs out, on purpose, for anybody. The latch string is out. Say it, because people in this country will be saying it for the next 150 years, long after most of them have forgotten what a latch string was. It becomes a fixed phrase in American speech, a way of saying, "You are welcome here, my door opens to your hand." Frontier memoirs from Pennsylvania to Kentucky to Illinois repeat it like a creed. The latch string was always out. Travellers' accounts say it. Old settlers' reminiscences say it. When a man wanted to insult a neighbour, to declare a feud, there was a phrase for that too. The latch string is pulled in for you. Understand what the string means out here, though, because it is not innocence. It is arithmetic. You leave the string out in daylight because out here, a stranger at your door is not a threat first. He is, in this exact order, news, labour, company, and a mouth to feed. And only after all of that, maybe, a threat. A traveller brings word of prices in Lancaster, of sickness on the creeks, of what the assembly is doing, of the war. He'll swing an axe for his supper. He'll sit by your fire and be a new human face, and you have seen exactly 11 human faces that are not your family since August. And there is a harder piece of arithmetic under that one. Some day, on some road, the stranger will be you. Your husband caught in weather 10 miles out. Your son someday going over the next ridge. Every open door on the frontier is a payment into a fund you fully expect to draw on. Hospitality here isn't a virtue, it's infrastructure. It's the only inn, the only post office, the only newspaper, and the only insurance policy for 400 miles, and everyone pays the premium by leaving the string out. So don't let anyone tell you these people didn't lock things. Come here. Come look at the chest. It sits at the foot of the big bed, oak, iron-strapped, brought over the ocean by your husband's father, and it has a lock, a real one, an iron chest lock with a turned key, made by a smith who knew his trade. Inside it, the deed to this land such as it is, 17 shillings in coin, your mother's silver spoons, 2 of them, the good linen, papers. The key hangs on a cord around your neck under your shift, and it has hung there so long you'd feel naked without the small cold weight of it between your breasts. The Bible has its brass clasp. The lean-to where the tools live has a hasp and a padlock your husband bought in Lancaster, because a broadaxe walks off easier than a cow. Locks are not new. Let's be clear about this, because tonight's whole story turns on it. The lock is one of the oldest machines human beings possess. The Egyptians had wooden pin locks 4,000 years ago. Wooden pins dropping to a bolt, lifted by a wooden key, which is, and hold on to this thought for later, almost exactly the principle a man in New York will perfect in the 1860s and put on every door you've ever touched. The Romans had iron locks and wards. Medieval smiths made locks of such cunning that they were shown as masterpieces. In 1755 there were English rim locks, iron boxes screwed to the inside of doors, on merchants' houses in Philadelphia, on counting rooms, on the doors of the wealthy. In town, a prosperous man locks his front door at night, and his strong room always. So America did not start unlocked because locks hadn't been invented. Locks were ancient. What was different? What was genuinely, provably different in this country for a very long time was who locked, and what, and when. You lock the chest because the chest holds the things that can be carried off and can never be replaced. You padlock the tools. You bar the door at night, against animals, against the dark, against the general shapelessness of night itself. But the house in daylight, the house as a place a human being might approach and enter, that stays open, because out here the stranger is worth more than the risk of him. The lock exists. It's just aimed at things, not at people. That's the real shape of it. Not no locks. Locks for property, a string for people. Hold that distinction all night. Watching it reverse, watching the lock swing slowly around until it points at people. That's the whole story we're walking through. You lift the latch now, from inside, just raising the bar with your thumb, feeling the worn place in the wood where 1,000 mornings of thumbs have polished it, and you open the door on the cold. Grey light, mist standing in the clearing like floodwater. The stumps of the trees your husband killed, 40 of them ghost shapes down to the creek. Somewhere a long way off, a wolf, finishing the night shift. You stand in the doorway with your arms crossed against the cold, and you do what you do every single morning of your life. You read the clearing, fence line, cow, corn crib, tree line. It takes 4 seconds and you will do it until you die, and your daughter will do it after you, this small scanning habit of people who live past the edge of help. And because I promised to tell you which is which, the fear out here is real, and 1755 is the worst possible year to pretend it isn't. This is the year of Braddock's defeat. July 9th, 1755, a British army cut to pieces on the Monongahela. And through this autumn and winter, raids are burning farms along this whole frontier. Settlers are pulling back east over the mountains in wagon loads. Some nights this month, depending on which creek the rumours ride up, your latch-string comes in before the sun is even down, and your husband checks the priming on the long gun that hangs over the door, and the double-thick planks you wondered about earlier make their argument plain. The frontier door was never naive. It could close hard. The point your descendants will lose track of, is that closed hard was the exception, the wartime setting, the storm shutter. The everyday setting, the default your whole world ran on, was open. A door is a question a house asks about the world, and out here, most days the answer was, "Come in." By full light the children are up, and the room smells of corn mush and wood smoke, and a little after noon. This is a Tuesday in late October 1755. The dog stands up by the hearth with his ears forward, a low sound in his chest, and a moment later you hear it too. A man's voice on the path, calling the house from a polite distance, the way it's done. Hello. He stands at the clearing's edge where he can be seen, hands visible, and waits. Even with the string out, nobody just walks in. There's a grammar to this, a whole etiquette of approach, and every honest traveller knows it, which is exactly how you spot the ones who don't. Your husband steps to the doorway. A look passes between the two men across 60 feet of stump ground, a look that does everything a peephole and a chain will do 2 centuries from now, and does it faster. Pack peddler, worn boots, worn straps, tin pots clattering on the pack like dull bells. Alone. The string's out, your husband says, which means, come on then. His name, he says, is Fisher, out of Lancaster by way of reading, and he sits at your table and eats your mush and butter, and pays the only coin that matters out here, which is talk, prices, the war news, which is bad, who's abandoned their place on the Conococheague, who's dead, who's lying about being dead, needles he's got, and thread, ribbon, 2 knives, an almanac. You buy needles. The children stare at him the way you'd stare at Comet. He sleeps the night on the floor by your fire, a total stranger, breathing 8 feet from your children. And understand, this is so ordinary that nobody in the house will ever once think of it as a decision. And in the morning he shoulders his pack, thanks you at the door, and tells you, because peddlers flatter, that a body finds the best welcome on the worst roads. Then he's gone into the mist, and the clearing is just the clearing again. That night, last thing, you pull the string in. Small leather sound through the bored hole. Soft knock of the latch bar settling. The children are asleep. The key is around your neck. The gun is over the door. The string is in. Locked enough. Watched enough. Known enough. Out here that's what safe is made of. Those 3 things, braided. There is no 4th thing. There won't be for a long time. Now come east with me, and come forward 80 years, because the next room we need to stand in isn't a cabin at the edge of the war. It's a white house on a green street in a small town where everybody, and I mean this with a precision you're going to feel in your skin, everybody knows your name. It's 1843 now, a Thursday in June, and the first thing you notice is the sound of your own front door, because you're standing in front of it, on the inside, with a dust rag in your hand, and you realise you cannot remember the last time it was locked. You're 51 years old, a merchant's wife in a town in central Ohio of about 900 souls. Courthouse, 2 churches going on 3, a grist mill, your husband's dry goods store on the square, and a names on the town limits that I'm not going to give you, because this town is every town, stitched together from the county histories and the old settlers' reminiscences of 100 places just like it. The rooms are true. The eyes are on loan. You know the deal. Look at this door, though, because it's telling you something important. It's a proper door now. Milled, painted, a 6-panel door with a box lock. An actual iron rim lock screwed to the inside face. Made in Connecticut because by the 1840s Connecticut is turning out cheap hardware the way it turns out clocks. And almost every decent house in town has a lock on the front door as a matter of course. The lock came with the door. The door came with the house. And there is a key. The key is in the lock. It has been in the lock, on the inside, for 11 years. There's a fine haze of rust where the shank meets the iron, and last winter when your husband tried to turn it. One night when a horse thief was rumoured to be working the county, and we'll get to that rumour. It took him both hands and a grunt, and the bolt ground over like a man being woken from the dead. Then he looked a little embarrassed, turned it back, and never touched it again. That's the true fact under your grandmother's story, and I want to plant it deep because this is the era her story actually comes from. The unlocked American door was real. Here, in the small towns and the farm country, roughly from the founding of the town until the day we'll get to near the end of tonight, it was as real as weather. The lock was present, bought, installed, painted over, and unused. Some towns' old-timers, writing their reminiscences 50 years later, will say they never once saw a house key in their childhood, that when a family went to a funeral or a camp meeting, they left the house standing open with the dinner laid under a cloth on the table. Those reminiscences are memory, and memory flatters. I said I'd flag it, and I'm flagging it. But they're too many, too consistent and too full of mundane detail to be nothing. The unlocked town existed. What your grandmother got wrong was why. She thought it was because people were better then. Stand here in 1843 with a dust rag for one single morning, and you'll see it wasn't that. It was because nobody was a stranger. And I need you to understand what that means in a town of 900, because it does not mean people were friendly. It means something much stronger and much stranger. It means anonymity had not been invented yet. Not here. Watch the street with me. It's 8:30 in the morning. Through the parlour window, and note please, that the parlour window has no curtains drawn. Curtains drawn in daylight mean sickness or death, and the whole street would be at your door by noon asking which. Through that bare window you can see maybe 40 rods of Main Street, and in the next 10 minutes 11 people pass along it, and you know every single one of them. Not know of. No. There goes Mr. Aldrich the tinner, opening his shop late again, and you know he's late because he sat up with his brother's family, who have the fever. There's the widow Prentice's girl carrying eggs, which means the widow is short of cash money again this month. 2 farm wagons, and the Kellers and the Boyds in for salt and calico. A man you don't know rides past on a bay horse, and pay attention to what happens in your own chest when I say that. A small cold click of attention, involuntary as a knee-jerk. A stranger. By supper time, and I am barely exaggerating, the whole town will know that a stranger on a bay horse passed through on the Columbus Road, and whether he stopped, and what he asked for, and how he wore his hat. If he stays the night at the tavern, the landlord will have his name, his business, his home county, and his opinions before the man's boots are off. Not because the landlord is nosy, though he is, but because that is the tavern keeper's civic function, as fixed as the miller's. The town swallows a stranger like an oyster swallows grit. Coat him in attention until he's either smooth and known or gone. That is the lock you see. Everyone knew you. That was the lock. 900 people in a bowl of farmland, every one of them visible to all the others, every reputation carried in common like a public ledger. In this town you cannot spend money nobody knows you have. You cannot sell a silver spoon that isn't yours, because the spoon is known. Spoons have initials, and everyone knows whose initials, and you cannot carry it to the next town to sell, because in the next town you're a stranger with silver, which is the most conspicuous thing a man can be, and their tavern keeper will do to you exactly what ours does. A thief in this world doesn't face a lock problem. Locks are old technology. Any smith's boy can defeat this rim lock with a bent wire, and everyone knows it. A thief here faces a fencing problem, a witness problem, and everyone recognizes your walk at 200 yards problem. The town is a lock with 900 moving parts, and it is armed day and night, and nobody can pull its string in. And when I say watched, I need you to understand what that means, because this isn't modern watched, cameras and passwords. This is your neighbour, Mrs. Harmon, who from her kitchen commands a view of your back door, your woodpile, and your clothesline, and who has drawn conclusions from all three within living memory. This is a town where the doctor's horse standing at a gate is a bulletin, where the whole street knows what you take at the store on credit, where courting couples are tracked like weather systems. You are safe here the way a fly in amber is safe. The trust of the small town was not a warm feeling between individuals. It was a system of total mutual surveillance so complete, so airless, that honesty was simply the cheapest way to live. And everyone in it knew its price, even the people who loved it, and the price was that the town's eye never blinked and never looked away. Your grandchildren will buy deadbolts partly to keep out what this town kept out with gossip. They will also, some of them, move to cities specifically to get away from Mrs. Harmon. Hold both of those. Both are true, and tonight runs on both. Now, because I promised you honesty over comfort, let's be clear that things are stolen in this town. Of course they are. Washing off the line. Apples, chickens, once a saddle out of Deacon Whitfield's barn. Horses above all. The horse thief is the one professional criminal this world genuinely fears, because a horse is the one piece of property that carries itself out of the county at speed, out past where being known can follow it. That's exactly why the men of this town, like men in thousands of towns like it, have a horse thief society, the Anti-Horse Thief Association, dues of 50 cents, half the county enrolled by the 1850s and 60s in societies just like it across the settled states, pledged to ride after any member's stolen stock. Notice what the system is, though. It isn't a wall, it isn't a lock, it's a posse held in reserve, punishment, not prevention. This world doesn't try to make theft physically impossible, it makes theft socially fatal. The lock, when it finally conquers this country, will represent the exact opposite theory of safety. Trust no one, harden the shell, prevent. What we're watching tonight, all night, is one theory replacing the other, door by door. There's an etiquette here I want you to feel in your hand before we leave, because when it dies completely. The unlocked door does not mean people barge in. The front door is for formality. The minister, funerals, weddings, strangers on formal business, and hardly anyone uses it, which is partly why nobody bothers locking it. Real traffic comes to the kitchen door, and it comes with a grammar as fixed as the peddler's halloo in the clearing. A rap of knuckles, the door swinging in the same motion, a voice calling out, "It's only me." And then your neighbour is standing in your kitchen mid-sentence. "It's only me." Think how much machinery is packed into 3 words. I am known to you, my footstep is known, my errand is ordinary. Nobody in this town has ever once stood at a locked door of a neighbour and waited to be let in, the way one waits at the door of a stranger or a jail. The unlocked door isn't carelessness. It's a declaration the house makes all day, every day, to everyone. We are members of one another. The latch string is out. People here still say it, though the latch strings themselves are 2 generations gone, and most of the children saying it couldn't tell you what a latch bar was. The phrase has already outlived the technology. Phrases do that. Remember that 6 chapters from now, when a porch light means the opposite of what it means tonight. And in fairness, 1 flag more, there are locked doors in this town and the town notices them. Old Mr. Sawley, who lends money at interest, locks his door day and night, and the town takes it exactly the way you'd expect, as a confession. Locking up is what a man does when he has something no one should see, or believes his neighbours to be thieves, and either way the lock is read as an insult aimed outward at the whole street. In 1843 in this town, a locked front door is not prudence. It is a character flaw. 60 years from now, in the city we're going to next, an unlocked door will be the character flaw. Same country, same iron bolt. The entire moral polarity of a piece of hardware is going to flip, and it flips first in the cities, and it flips because of one thing above everything else. Not because city people had worse hearts, because the city did the one thing this town cannot imagine. It made the stranger normal. Tonight, before bed, watch what you actually do. You, the merchant's wife, moving through the downstairs with a lamp. You bank the stove. You set the lamp in the front window and turn the wick low. The light left burning, the old signal, so anyone abroad late on a dark road knows there's a waking welcome behind that glass if trouble finds them. Your mother did it. Her mother did it in a cabin, with the string pulled in. You check that the cat is out and the bread is covered. You do not touch the key. The key stands in the lock like a fossil in rock, rusted into the theory of a danger no one here has ever needed to believe in. Upstairs, your husband is already asleep. From the window, Main Street lies in moonlight, every house along it dark and open. 40 unlocked doors within sight of your own. 900 people lying down defenceless with total confidence inside a lock made entirely of each other. It is, though not one soul in this town would ever use such words, one of the most complete security systems human beings have ever operated. It requires no iron and no key. It requires only that everyone stay, that everyone be known, that no one ever be able to walk away from their own name, which is exactly what, at this very moment, 300 miles east of your window, 500,000 people are learning how to do. The cities are filling. The ships are coming up the harbours packed to the rails. The canals and the new railroads are pouring the countryside's restless children into Manhattan and Philadelphia and Boston, and in those swelling wards a human being can do the unprecedented thing. The thing this town believes to be impossible, live at arm's length from 10,000 people and be known by none of them. No tavern keeper takes their name, no Mrs. Harmon reads their clothesline. The public ledger of reputation, the lock with 900 moving parts. None of it works there, none of it ever worked there, and the people streaming into those wards are discovering anonymity, the way settlers once discovered ground that wouldn't hold a fence post. Something else will have to hold the doors. Something else does, is made of brass. It fits in a waistcoat pocket, and the man who perfects it is, at this moment in 1843, A young portrait painter in upstate New York who hasn't yet given up on art and gone into his father's shop. Give him 20 years. Come to the city. Bring your key. The stairwell is black. That's the first fact of your life every single night, and it's the first fact now. 4 flights of tenement stairs on the Lower East Side of Manhattan with no window and no lamp, and you climb them by hand, literally by hand, palm on the greasy rail, counting steps, 13 to the turn, 11 to the landing, through a darkness that smells of coal smoke, boiled cabbage, privies, wet plaster, and the close-packed bodies of the roughly 150 human beings who live in this one building. It is a February evening in 1868. You're 19 years old, a seamstress, born in County Cork, 4 years in America, and you are listening as you climb. That's the city skill, the one nobody taught you and everyone here has. Ears forward in the dark, sorting footsteps above and below, because in this stairwell, and here is the sentence that would stop the heart of that merchant's wife in Ohio. In this stairwell, you do not know most of the people you can hear. Sit with that. In the town we just left, that sentence was impossible. Here it is Tuesday. This building holds more people than some villages you've heard of, and they change constantly. Families in, families out, boarders, lodgers, men who pay for half a bed and work nights. You know the Kellys next door. You know the landlady, Mrs. Vogel, on the first floor. You know the cigar maker across the landing by his cough. The rest are footsteps. The city has performed its great trick, the trick that makes it the city. It has packed people closer together than they have ever lived in this country, and made them strangers to each other at a range of 8 feet. Anonymity by density. The town's lock, being known, has no parts here. It never did. So listen to what New York sounds like at 10 o'clock at night, because it sounds like the answer. Up and down this stairwell, up and down every stairwell on this street, doors are shutting for the night, and after each door comes a little ritual of iron, the snap of a spring latch, the grind of a key, then the bolts, and I need you to understand what that means in a tenement in 1868, because this isn't one polite bolt. The doors of the poor in this city wear iron the way the doors of the frontier wore oak. A sliding bolt at the height of your hand, another at the height of your knee, because a kick lands low, a wooden bar for some dropped into Staples, the medieval solution, alive and well on Mott Street. Travellers and reformers who go into these wards write about it. The poorest rooms in America, rooms holding nothing but a bed, a stove and a trunk, fastened up at night like fortresses. The city poor lock hardest of anyone, and they always have, because they live closest to the theft, because a lost week's wages is a catastrophe, and because the trunk in the corner is the chest at the foot of the bed in that Pennsylvania cabin, holding everything that cannot be replaced. You reach your own door, yours and your sister's, and your hand finds the key without your mind joining in. It hangs on a ribbon around your neck, under your dress, the small cold weight of it between your breasts, and if that gesture feels familiar, it should. It's the same gesture, the same warm metal on the same breastbone, as the chest key in the cabin a century before. The key has moved from the chest to the door. That's the whole history of the American city in one sentence. The lock has swung around. It points at people now. Inside, turn, click, and then your own ritual of iron. Bottom bolt, top bolt, and the chair. Not under the knob, that's for the melodramas, but where you'll trip on it if the door opens in the night. Your sister is already asleep behind the curtain. The stove ticks as it cools. Somewhere above, a man is shouting in German, and below an infant. And through the wall the cigar maker coughs his cough, and around you the building settles into its bolted, breathing dark. 150 strangers, stacked 5 high, locked against each other, and lying down to sleep 8 feet apart. Nobody here calls a locked door a character flaw. Here, an unlocked door is the character flaw, carelessness, greenness, the mark of a rube just off the boat, and the first person to tell you so, your first week in this building, was Mrs. Vogel herself, stood in the hall with her ring of keys on her hip like a jailer's, saying in her accented English the first commandment of the city, lock it or lose it. In the town, remember, the lock insulted the neighbours. Here it flatters them. It's simply what everyone does about the unknowable street. Same species, same country, same iron bolt, different world. And it's not only fear of losing a shawl and a week's wages, and I'd be lying by omission if I told it that way. The city has burglars, actual professionals, a trade with its own tools and its own slang and its own celebrities, sneak thieves and second-story men, and the newspapers of the 1860s print their exploits the way they print ship arrivals. It has the districts respectable New York crosses the street to avoid. It has the memory, fresh, 5 years old, of the draft riots of July 1863, 4 days when the city ate itself, buildings burned and looted and more than 100 dead, when every door in Lower Manhattan was locked and barred, and it mattered not at all to anyone whose building was chosen. Nobody who breathed that smoke ever again believed a door was a promise. A door is a delay. That is the city's cold catechism, and every lock on this stairwell is a recitation of it. I cannot make you unable to come in. I can make you loud, and I can make you slow, and I can buy myself the minutes between loud and help. The town bought safety with reputation. The city buys it by the minute, in iron. Which brings us, because the city's appetite for iron is about to meet the American genius for manufacturing, to the man I promised you, the portrait painter. His name is Linus Yale Jr. And yes, that Yale, the name that is stamped, at this very moment in 1868, into brass cylinders all over this city, and will one day be stamped into more doors than any other name on earth. He was born in 1821 in upstate New York, and he genuinely did set out to be a portrait painter. That part of the legend is true, until the pull of his father's trade won out. Linus Yale Sr. kept a lock shop, specializing in bank locks, and the son turned out to have the rarest kind of mechanical mind, the kind that attacks its own trade. He made his name first as a picker of other men's bank locks and a builder of unpickable ones. The Yale Infallible, the Yale Magic, the Monitor, locks for vaults, locks for banks, beautiful, expensive, famous in the trade. And then he did the thing that matters to your front door. He reached backward 4,000 years. Remember the Egyptian lock from the beginning of tonight? The wooden pins dropping by gravity into the bolt, lifted clear by the pegs of a wooden key? I told you to hold on to it. Yale took that ancient principle. Pins of different lengths sitting in a row, each one needing to be lifted to exactly the right height before anything moves. And he miniaturized it, precision machined it in brass, coiled a spring behind each pin, and curled the whole mechanism into a small rotating plug inside a cylinder. He patented his cylinder locks in 1861 and in improved form in 1865 in the middle of the Civil War. while the country was busy with other iron. And the revolution wasn't only the mechanism, it was the key. Look at the keys of 1860 and you see the whole problem. Door keys were iron, long as your finger, heavy as a spoon. The key to a house was a thing you carried the way you'd carry a tool in a basket on a ring, a domestic burden, and they were stupid, mechanically speaking, crude wards that any bent wire could flatter. Yale's key was a flat sliver of brass, cut with a jagged little mountain range along one edge, light enough to forget, small enough for a waistcoat pocket, a watch chain, a ribbon around a seamstress's neck. Small enough, and here is the sentence on which the next century of American life quietly turns. Small enough for every member of a household to carry one, all day, everywhere, without noticing. And behind that little key, 5 spring-loaded pins in a brass cylinder, each of which must be lifted to within a hair's breadth of exactly right, all 5 at once, before the plug will turn. Millions of possible combinations in a mechanism the size of your thumb, mass-producible by machine to identical tolerances, cheap enough, soon, for a tenement landlady to buy by the dozen. In October of 1868, Linus Yale Jr. shakes hands with a young engineer named Henry Town, and they found the partnership, Yale and Town, of Stamford, Connecticut, that will carry the little cylinder to the world, one of those American factory names like Colt or Singer, that turn an invention into a fact of daily life. And then, that same winter, Christmas Day, 1868, Yale drops dead of a heart attack in New York City, 47 years old, months into the partnership, and never sees any of it. Never sees the factory at its full roar, never sees his name become the generic word for key in half a dozen languages, never sees the century in which the twist of his little flat key becomes the most repeated mechanical gesture in American life, performed more times each day than any other, the goodnight word of every house, the sound the whole country will eventually make at dusk. He aimed his genius at bank vaults, at the doors of money. It landed on the doors of everyone. Not instantly, let me keep the timeline honest, because the deadbolt evangelists of a later chapter will try to tell you the pin tumbler conquered America overnight. It didn't. In 1868, the cylinder is still the coming thing. The tenements bolt themselves with iron sliders, and the row houses make do with rim locks, and it will take decades, catalogues, patents expiring, competitors like Sargent and Corbin and Russwin piling in, and eventually a Sears Roebuck catalogue selling factory door locks for cents apiece to every crossroads in America, before the cylinder is simply what a door has, but the direction is set, and here is the strange, lovely, ominous thing about it. The lock that anonymity demanded turned out to run on anonymity. The old town lock worked because everyone knew everyone. The pin tumbler works precisely because nobody needs to know anybody. The cylinder doesn't care who you are, what your name is, whether the town approves of you. It asks one question. Do the pins rise to the shear line? And trust. That whole airless, warm, human machinery of being known has been compressed into 5 brass splinters and handed back to you as a flat piece of metal. Trust with the people taken out. You can carry it on a ribbon between your breasts. You can also lose it, which is why, within a generation, the country will invent the spare key under the mat. Hold on to that one too. It fires in Chapter 6. So here is where we stand, a little past the century's middle mark. 2 Americas, running 2 different operating systems on the same species of door. The town and the farm, doors open, keys rusted into their locks, Safety made of names and eyes. The city. Doors bolted, keys warm against skin, safety made of brass and minutes. And if the two systems had stayed in their separate territories, your grandmother's unlocked town might have lasted another century. They did not stay separate. Because in 1869, the year after Yale's heart stopped, a golden spike goes into a tie at Promontory Summit, Utah, and the rails run ocean to ocean, and the two Americas are now one iron circuit. And the railroad is about to deliver to the doorstep of every trusting town in this country the one thing its lock of names cannot process. Not the burglar, not the cylinder, the stranger. Thousands of him, walking. The knock comes at the kitchen door a little after 2 in the afternoon, and it's wrong before you've taken a step. You're standing at the table with your hands in bread dough. It's August of 1877 now, a farmhouse on the edge of a town in Illinois, a quarter-mile from where the Chicago, Burlington and Quincy tracks cut through the Nelson pasture. And you know, the way you know a wrong note in a hymn, that this is nobody you know. Your people don't knock like that. Your people rap and come in on the same motion. It's only me, that whole grammar we learned in Ohio. This knock is 3 slow beats and then silence. The knock of a man who is waiting to find out what kind of house this is. The knock of a stranger. Flower to her elbows, your daughter looks at you. The dog is already at the door with his hackles up. That dog again. There's been a dog at every door tonight, and there will be a dog at the last one. You wipe one hand on your apron, and you do something that you have never done in your life, that your mother in her town never did in hers. You look at the door and calculate it. Latched. Yes, the screen door, against flies. Locked. No, your husband is in the far field. The hired man is with him. It is you, your daughter, the dog, and the door. Then you open it because it's 1877 and you're not yet who your granddaughter will be. And on the porch, hat in his hands, stands a man of maybe 30 in a collarless shirt, gone the colour of dust, boots cracked white, a bedroll on a string across his back. He keeps a careful 6 feet of distance. He knows this ritual too. He's done it 400 times. And he asks quietly whether he might do some work for a meal. Split wood. Anything. Hold this moment, because the whole chapter turns on it, and so does the country. A century of American doors has known exactly what to do with this man. He's the peddler at the clearing's edge, the traveller with news, the stranger of the frontier priced as labour and company first. And this woman on this porch does feed him. That's the honest record. Hundreds of thousands of meals handed over back steps in these years. Wood split, buckets carried, biscuits wrapped in yesterday's newspaper. But watch what else is in her chest. Brand new, cold as well water. She's afraid of him. Not of anything he's done. Of the fact that she cannot place him. He has no name she can check, no county, no people. The tavern keeper's questions have no purchase here, because he'll be gone on the next freight, and behind him, this is the part that changes everything. Behind him there are more. He is not a stranger. He is the stranger, plural, industrial, arriving on schedule with the trains. They call him a tramp. The word itself is old, to go tramping, to walk, but it's in these exact years, the 1870s, that American newspapers turn it into a noun with teeth. The tramp, a national character, a national menace, the subject of 10,000 editorials. And he was manufactured, this new man, by 2 machines we've already met. The first is the railroad. 35,000 miles of track at the war's end, 70,000 by the mid-1870s. a nervous system connecting every trusting little town to every other, which for the first time in the country's history lets a man with no money move hundreds of miles namelessly, out of every web of reputation faster than his story can follow him. The second machine is Catastrophe, on September 18th, 1873. A real date. Write it in the margin of your grandmother's story. The great banking house of J. Cook and Company fails in Philadelphia. The panic of 1873 detonates, and the country falls into the longest depression it has yet known. Railroads go bankrupt by the dozen. Mills close, and within months the roads and rail lines of America fill with men. Huge numbers of them, and here I owe you a flag because nobody counted. Contemporary guesses ran from tens of thousands to 1 million and beyond. Numbers flung around by editors who needed them big. The honest answer is that the count was never made, and every figure you'll ever read from that decade is somewhere between an estimate and a shout. What's documented beyond argument is the phenomenon itself. A floating army of unemployed men, many of them, note, Civil War veterans, men the army itself had taught to march, forage and sleep on the ground, moving town to town along the tracks, asking at kitchen doors, and now watch the panic being built, because this is the first time you'll see the machine that builds it, and it will not be the last time tonight. It has 3 parts. Part 1. Real hardship, real wandering men, and yes, real crime among them sometimes. Barns burned, henhouses emptied, and some genuine horrors that made honest headlines. Part 2. The telegraph and the mass newspaper, which can now take an incident in one state and serve it by morning to the breakfast tables of 30 others, so that a farm wife in Illinois fears something that happened in Vermont, which no earlier generation of farm wives could have done, because fear used to travel at the speed of a horse, and now it travels at the speed of lightning. Part 3. The editorial voice, which discovers that the tramp sells. Through the mid-1870s, the respectable press of the United States talks itself into a fever. The tramp is not an unemployed man. He is a new species, idle by nature, vicious by choice. It gets ugly enough that in the summer of 1877 the Chicago Tribune prints, as a joke, its editors will spend years insisting it was a joke, the suggestion that a little arsenic in the food handed out at back doors would end the tramp nuisance. Sit with that sentence a moment. A great American newspaper joking about poisoning the men at the kitchen door. The same handed-out plate that had been the frontier's sacrament for 200 years. That is how fast a hospitality can curdle when fear gets a printing press. The law moves too. New Jersey passes its Tramp Act in 1876, and state after state follows within the decade. Statutes that make the act of wandering without means itself a crime, punishable by workhouse and hard labour. Read those laws closely and you see what they're really doing. They are criminalising namelessness. The small town could never process a man without a name. Now it doesn't have to. It can jail him. Alan Pinkerton, the country's most famous detective, publishes a book in 1878 with tramps in the title, alongside strikers and communists, which tells you exactly what respectable America has decided the wandering man is, one face of a single creeping menace. And in July of 1877, the very month of that Tribune joke, the great railroad strike sweeps from West Virginia to Chicago to St. Louis. Rail yards burn in Pittsburgh, militia fire into crowds, and for 2 weeks respectable America believes, truly believes, that the wandering poor are the advance guard of an insurrection. None of the men on the roads planned any such thing, and the strike was strikers, not tramps. But fear does not file carefully, and the town's fear of the man at the kitchen door and the nation's fear of the mob in the rail yard fuse into one feeling with one instruction attached: lock the door. And they begin, here, in these years, in the daylight. This is the hinge, so let me say it precisely. The night bar was always there. Night belonged to the dark, and the dark was never trusted. What the tramp years introduce is something genuinely new in the small towns and the farm country. The door locked in the daytime because of people. The advice columns and the county papers of the late 1870s and 80s begin telling farm wives outright, when the men are in the fields, keep the doors fastened, do not admit wandering men when alone. The stories women tell each other change. Every county grows its tale of the tramp who did something terrible, and flag again. Most of those tales, chased back through the files, dissolve into somewhere else, someone said. The paper reported it from another state. It does not matter. A rumour cannot be cross-examined, and a lock is cheap. Hardware men notice sales of bolts and padlocks ticking upward in tramp years. In town after town, the kitchen door, the neighbour's door, the it's only me door, acquires a hook, then a bolt, used first only on days when a tramp has been seen on the line, then on days when one might have been, then, in some houses, always. But do not let me overtell it. Honesty over drama, that was the deal. The tramp panic did not lock America. Walk those same towns in 1885, in 1895, and most front doors still stand unlocked most of the time. The panic flares with each depression. 1873, again in 1893 when the roads fill anew, and ebbs when work returns. The handed-out meal at the back step survives it all, straight through to the hobo jungles of the 1930s. Your grandmother's unlocked town is still standing, still real, still mostly true. What the tramp years put into it is smaller and worse and permanent, a category. The town now has a slot in its mind labelled dangerous stranger at the door in daylight, with a procedure attached, and once a mind has a slot, every decade that follows will find something to file in it. The frontier priced the stranger as news, labour and company. The tramp years reprice him, nationally, in print, as risk. That repricing is the actual mortal wound to the world of the latch-string, and note, write this down next to the date of the panic, the wound was not delivered by crime. The amount of actual harm done at kitchen doors by wandering men, as far as any honest historian can reconstruct it, was a whisper compared to the roar of ink about it. The trust didn't fail because the strangers turned dangerous. It failed because the strangers became countless, and the fear of them became printable, and both arrived on the same iron rails. She feeds him, our composite farm wife, this August afternoon in 1877, bread, cold pork, buttermilk, on the porch step, not at the table. Her mother would have set the table, and she knows it, and something in her flinches at the difference, even as she keeps her feet planted in the doorway. He splits wood for an hour, neat and fast, stacks it, thanks her from his careful 6 feet, and walks back toward the line to wait for the westbound freight. She watches him the whole length of the lane. Then she goes inside and, listen, slides the new bolt on the kitchen door at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and stands there a moment with her hand still on it, feeling foolish, feeling safe, feeling something in between that has no name yet but is going to spend the next century getting one. That night at supper she doesn't mention him to her husband. There's nothing to tell. A tramp, a meal, an hour's wood. But after the lamps are out she lies awake, listening to the far-off freight assembling itself in the dark, that Long Island sentence rolling west, carrying its cargo of nameless men past 10,000 farmhouse doors, and she thinks any of them could get off. That thought, not a tramp, but the thought, is the thing the railroad truly delivered. Anyone could get off. The line runs past everyone's pasture now. Every town is on the way to every other. Distance, the old silent partner of the latch-string, quietly resigning. Give it 40 years, and the thought gets an engine of its own, because the next machine doesn't run on rails past the edge of town on a schedule, whistling its warnings. The next machine comes straight up Main Street, and it stops wherever it likes, and it belongs to everybody, and it finishes what the freight train started. It makes the stranger ordinary. You hear it before you see it. Everyone in 1926 hears it before they see it. The 4-cylinder cough coming up the state road, and by the time you've got the awning cranked down over your storefront window, 3 of them have passed the square. Automobiles. You're 61 years old now, a hardware merchant in a county seat town in Indiana, 2nd generation in the store your father opened when the railroad came through, and you have spent your whole life behind a counter that sells, among its nails and stovepipe and harness snaps, locks, which makes you, though you'd never put it this way, the town's instrument for measuring exactly what we're measuring tonight. Your ledger is a seismograph of trust, and the needle is moving. Stand at your window a minute, the morning sun on the gilt letters, the smell of the store behind you, oiled steel, jute twine, kerosene, the cold metal smell of the key blanks in their little drawers. And look at the square, because the square has changed more in 15 years than in the previous 50. There are 24 automobiles nosed in around the courthouse lawn where the hitching rails used to be. Some you know, Doc Braun's Buick, the Hoffman boys' truck. But look at the plates: Marion County, Vigo County, Ohio, Illinois. A green sedan from Michigan, and nobody knows whose it is. And here is the thing, the enormous thing, the thing that would have stood your father's hair on end. Nobody wonders. 50 years ago, one stranger on a bay horse lit this town up like a switchboard. You remember the feeling in the chest of the merchant's wife, that cold, involuntary click. 30 years ago, one tramp on the section line put bolts on kitchen doors for a month. Now strangers roll through by the dozen before noon, stop, get out, stretch, buy gasoline and sandwiches and chewing gum, peer in your window and roll on. And the town has simply stopped processing them. It had to. The volume broke the machine. The tavern keeper's questions, the oyster and grit attention that coated every unknown face until it was known or gone. You cannot do that 12 times before dinner. The town's ancient immune system, overwhelmed at last, has quietly shut itself off, and what has replaced it is a new civic skill, so new nobody's named it. The incuriosity of modern life, the ability, the necessity, of looking at an unknown human being on your own Main Street and feeling nothing at all. Henry Ford did this more than any man. Since October of 1908, his Model T has come down the moving lines at River Rouge and Highland Park in numbers no machine had ever been made in. The price falling year by year from $825 toward $260 until by this year, 1926, there's something like 15 million of them sold, and America counts more motor vehicles registered than most nations count families. The numbered federal highways get their shields this very year, US 40, US 31, and the map of the country is redrawn as a lattice of anonymous approach. Understand what the automobile does to the geometry of being known, because it's not the railroad's trick again. It's worse, or better, depending on which side of the door you're standing. The railroad moved strangers along fixed lines, on schedules, to depots. The town could at least watch the mouth of the funnel. The automobile dissolves the funnel. Any man is now 3 hours from home in any direction at will, unannounced, on roads that pass every farmhouse in the county. And a man 3 hours from home is a man nobody knows. The stranger is no longer an event. He is traffic, and the town itself. This is the half of it your grandmother's story always leaves out. The town itself is the stranger now, somewhere else. Your own neighbours, the watchers, and the watched of the old airless, blessed surveillance are in those cars. Sunday, which for 100 years pinned every family in this county to a pew and a parlour within sight of each other, is now the day the Hoffmans motor 60 miles to the lakes, and the Bowers drive to her sisters in Terre Haute, and their houses stand behind them all day empty. Hold that word, empty. The unlocked town of 1843 was never empty. Someone was nearly always home, and the street watched the houses of anyone who wasn't. Mutual surveillance needs people present to do the mutual surveilling. The whole lock of names and eyes assumed a fixed population at fixed posts, and the automobile unfixes everyone. The sociologist will nail it down before the decade's out. The Lynn's famous study of an Indiana town not unlike yours, published in 1929 as Middletown, with its testimony of families who'd mortgaged the house before they give up the car, its ministers complaining that the Ford had beaten the Lord for possession of Sunday. What the reverends called godlessness, your ledger calls something simpler, the empty house problem. And the empty house problem has exactly one hardware solution. They come to your counter to buy it, and this is where your seismograph earns its keep. 15 years ago you sold house locks the way you sold lightning rods, steadily, thinly, mostly to new construction, and the keys, as often as not, went into a drawer. Now this year you sell them every week, and listen to the reasons, because the reasons are the history. We're motoring to a sister's Sunday, be gone all day, taking 2 weeks to Yellowstone in August, the tourist camps, the new vacation itself, a child of the car. Renting the upstairs to a fellow who travels for a wholesale house, and you stock the new hardware for the new reasons. Pin tumbler cylinders, Yale's brass splinters, now stamped out by the million in Stamford and New Britain, cheap as chisels, night latches, padlocks, and the little flat keys whose blanks you cut on a machine by the register, brass curls falling to the floor like clipped hair, the 20th century's own barber shop. Nobody buying them is frightened exactly. That's what your ledger says that the sermons don't. This wave of locking, the interwar wave, is not a panic. It's bookkeeping. The car emptied the house. The lock is the receipt. People lock now the way they wind the clock, because the house will be alone, and a house alone in a town full of traffic is a different object than a house alone in a town full of eyes. But there's a darker page in the ledger too, and honesty gets it read aloud. The automobile did not only carry picnics, it is, by the time you're standing at this window, the acknowledged accomplice of a new kind of crime, the getaway itself. Invented in these years, motor bandits, bank jobs timed to the minute, county lines crossed before the alarm bell stops swinging. The papers are full of it, and this time the papers aren't inventing the pattern, only enlarging it. The rural bank robbery becomes a plague of the 1920s Midwest, real enough that the Bankers' Associations post rewards, and the counties raise vigilance committees. Armed volunteers, deputized farmers with shotguns and their own fast cars, the Anti-Horse Thief Association reborn with carburetors, and the first mass property crime of the motor age is the motor itself. Automobile theft explodes so far past the reach of local law, the thief and the car being in the next state by morning, that Congress steps in with the Dyer Act in 1919, making interstate transport of a stolen vehicle a federal crime. Note what that is, structurally. The nation admitting that the anonymity radius of the automobile has outrun every local system of knowing, and only a national police power can follow it. The license plate, the driver's license, the FBI's growing fingerprint files, the whole apparatus of documented identity that your century will take for granted. All of it is, at bottom, the state building a replacement for the tavern keeper's questions. If the town can no longer know a man, the government will have to. And now the police start telling people to lock their doors. Publicly, officially, in print. And this is documented and it matters, because it is the first time in the American story that locking is preached as a civic duty, rather than muttered as a private judgment. Police chiefs' columns in the 20s and 30s papers, insurance company notices, the new burglary insurance industry's pamphlets, going away for the summer. Notify the police, stop the milk, lock all doors and windows. Your own county sheriff gives a talk to the Rotary. You were there, chicken and peas, on the modern housebreaker who motors in from the city, works the residential streets while families are at the pictures, and is 40 miles gone by 11 o'clock. The vacation house burglary, the picture show burglary, crimes that could not exist before the car, because they require what the car created. The reliably empty house and the anonymous approach. Prevention, the chief calls it, this new gospel. Don't invite crime. The old town punished thieves. The new town is told gently by uniformed men to expect them. So mark the automobile chapter's place in our mystery with care, because the trail turns here and it's easy to read the sign wrong. The car did not frighten America into locking. The 20s are not the 60s. There is no great fear abroad in this town tonight, and don't let anyone sell you one. What the car did was quieter and more final. It made the stranger ordinary, and it made the local absent. It dissolved in one generation both halves of the old equation, the knowable visitor and the ever-present watcher. After the automobile, the unlocked door is no longer a system, it's a habit. The trust economy is a bank whose deposits have all been withdrawn, whose doors stay open now on sheer institutional momentum, and habits, unlike systems, survive only until the first good shock. The town still feels trusting. Ask anyone on this square and they'll tell you with perfect sincerity that this is the kind of place where nobody locks their doors. But listen to what your ledger knows. They're buying the locks. They're using them Sundays and vacations and nights when the men are away, and each year few more use them every night, the way a habit erodes, not by decision, but by exceptions that stop feeling like exceptions. You close the store at 6, cash drawer counted, back door barred, merchants always locked, commerce never ran on the latch-string you'd tell anyone who asked. And then, out front on the sidewalk, key in hand, you pause, because down the block, the evening washing over the square, you can see old Mrs. Aldrich, a tinner's granddaughter, and if that name rings a bell from an Ohio street 80 years back, let it ring. These towns are all one town tonight, sitting out on her porch the way the old people still do, lamp lit behind her in the window, door standing open to the night air, and for a moment the street holds both centuries at once. Her open door, your key, the parked cars with their out-of-county plates cooling and ticking in the dusk between you. You turn the key, click, 5 brass pins, all at once, that sound your father's store never heard. Then you walk home past her porch and say good evening, and she says it back, and neither of you knows you've just exchanged the passwords of 2 different worlds. 20 years, 1 depression and 1 world war from tonight. This country is going to take everything on this square. The cars, the locks, the incuriosity, the empty daytime houses, and build a brand new kind of town out of them. Thousands of brand new towns overnight on the potato fields outside the cities. And in those new towns, it's going to try to have it both ways. Every door hung with a factory-fitted cylinder lock, and every family telling itself, hand on heart, that it lives in the kind of place where nobody needs to use it. For about 15 years, the strangest 15 years in the history of the American door, it will very nearly be true. The screen door bangs 3 times in the first hour after school, and you don't even look up from the ironing board. Bang! That's your Tommy, in for cookies. Bang! That's the Reinhardt boy from 2 doors down, following the cookies. Bang! Both of them gone again, out into the great communal backyard that is the whole subdivision, and the sound of the door slapping its frame is so much the sound of your life that you'd only notice it if it stopped. It's a Tuesday afternoon in May of 1957, and you're 29 years old, in a development of 900 nearly identical houses that was a Long Island potato field 5 years ago. Your husband rode the 741 into the city this morning. The baby is napping. The radio is on low. The iron smells of hot cotton and starch. And through the picture window, the great glass eye that every house here aims at the street, you can see 4 other picture windows aiming back. Come stand at this ironing board a while, because your grandmother's story, we never locked our doors, lives here. This is its second home, its revival, its Indian summer. When Americans a half-century from now close their eyes and summon the unlocked golden age, most of them won't see the Ohio parlor of 1843. They'll see this, the ranch house, the crew cuts, the bicycles left overnight on lawns, the milkman letting himself into the kitchen. And here is what makes this chapter the strangest one tonight. They'll be remembering something real, and it was already running on borrowed machinery, and nobody standing in it, including you, ever looked down. Take the real part first, because it deserves its due. The door of this house genuinely does stand unlocked from the moment you come down in your robe until the last light goes off. And so, as near as you can tell, does every door on the street. The milkman, Demel's Dairy, Tuesdays and Fridays, walks into kitchens up and down this block and sets the bottles in the refrigerator himself if the box is full, and leaves the ticket on the counter. The Fuller brush man gets invited in for coffee. Neighbour women cross lawns all day and rap and enter in one motion. It's only me. And if that grammar sounds familiar, it should. It's Ohio's kitchen door grammar, alive again a century later, 600 miles east, among people whose grandmothers actually did say it in Ohio. Children flow between houses like weather. Nobody here has ever once in your 5 years on this street spoken of burglars except as something in the Sunday supplements, something of the city, which is precisely the point of every mile between this kitchen and it. And now look down at the machinery, because the machinery is the paradox that gives this chapter its name. Go to your own front door, the one standing hospitably unlocked, And look at the hardware. A pin tumbler cylinder. Yell's brass splinters, or schlägers, or quicksets. Quickset, the cut-price cylinder out of California that's conquering the subdivisions in these exact years. Factory-fitted, builder-installed, sitting in every exterior door of every house in this development, and in Levittown, and in Lakewood, and in every FHA finance tract from here to the San Fernando Valley. Your grandmother's town had to go by its locks, one hesitant ledger line at a time. Your house came locked. The lock is in the purchase price, standard as the doorbell, and somewhere in a kitchen drawer, you'd have to think a moment, is a little envelope of flat brass keys you were handed at closing and have more or less never used. Here is the fact at the centre of the 1950s that nobody in the 1950s found strange. And I need you to see how strange it is. This is the first era in American history in which every family owns a working front door lock. Ownership at last universal, the cylinder's 90-year conquest complete. And it is simultaneously the era most famous for not locking. Peak lock, peak unlocked, same houses, same year. The hardware and the habit have come completely apart. The door has learned to lock. The neighbourhood just hasn't learned to be afraid yet. And the trust itself, put down the iron a second, because this is the sentence your granddaughter will need. The trust of this street is not the trust of the old town, no matter how alike they look through a picture window. The old town's trust was knowledge. 40 years of watching a man, his father before him, his credit at the store, his walk at 200 yards. Nobody on this street has known anybody longer than the subdivision has existed. 5 years, maximum. You, the Reinhardts, the Kowalskis, 900 families of strangers, technically mutual strangers, thrown together on graded mud in 1952. What you actually run on is something newer and thinner. Trust by resemblance. Everyone here is the same age, give or take 5 years. Same war behind the husband, same babies, same mortgage, 30 years, 4.5%, same lawn, same church, or close enough, same skin. That last one isn't an accident, and honesty gets it said plainly. These suburbs were built white on purpose. Levittown's leases said so in writing in the 40s, and the sameness that feels so warm from inside this kitchen is fenced, and the fence is part of how the trust works. Resemblance is doing here what reputation did in Ohio, standing guard at the edges so the middle can relax. It reads as safety. It is structurally a filter, trust by admissions policy. And a filter is not knowledge. The town knew its people. This street recognizes its people, which is faster and shallower and, hold this, much easier to spook. Knowledge can absorb a shock. You knew the man for 40 years. One strange night doesn't unmake him. Resemblance shatters at the first exception, because resemblance was always a bet, and everyone secretly knows it. Meanwhile, and history's never done layering its ironies, the key under the mat has its golden age. I told you in 1868 to hold on to the spare key. Here's where it fires. The key under the mat in the flower pot over the lintel in the milk box. The great American folk custom of the mid-century. The little brass secret that every family keeps, and every family keeps in the same 4 places. Think about what it actually is, structurally, because it's the whole era in one object. The technology of distrust, deployed, and then immediately, deliberately defeated. The lock installed and its answer hidden 6 inches away, where any of the neighbours, the milkman, the meter reader, and frankly any burglar in America could find it. The key under the mat is the 1950s telling the truth about itself. We own the machinery of the locked world, and we cannot yet bring ourselves to live in it. The mat is the exact halfway point between the latch string and the deadbolt. The string hung outside the door and said, "Come in." The key hides outside the door and says, "We had to lock it, but we didn't mean anything by it. Nobody means anything by it. Yet." 2 more objects in this kitchen, and then the sun can go down. The first is on the counter. Today's Mail, and in it the little suburban newspaper, and the point about the paper is what isn't in it. Its crime page is bicycle thefts and a stolen outboard motor. The city's sirens are 20 miles and a world away, and this thinness of bad news is not because the world is thin, it's because your news is still local, still bounded, one of the last bounded things you own. Which brings us to the second object, the one in the living room with the rabbit ears and the 10-inch bulge of grey-green glass, the television. Nearly 9 in 10 American homes have one by the end of this decade, the fastest adoption of any machine in the country's history, faster than the Model T, faster than the telephone, and right now, tonight, it is the friendliest object in the house. Lucy, Gunsmoke, the men with the weather maps. But mark it before you leave this kitchen, because we are one chapter from needing it. The telegraph, remember, let fear travel at the speed of lightning. But it arrived as ink, at breakfast once a day, and you could fold it shut. This machine will deliver fear as faces, at dinner every night, in the corner of the room where the family sits. The machine that can make something that happened once, somewhere, to someone, feel like it is happening always, everywhere, to you. It is sitting quietly under its doily now, warming up its tubes. Give it 8 years. Evening. Your husband home, fed, mowing the back strip in the last light because the Reinhardts mowed theirs. Tommy in the tub. You move through the downstairs, doing the night circuit your great-great-grandmothers would recognize in their bones. Stove off, milk box out, cat out, porch light on. The porch light. Still, tonight, in 1957, mostly what the lamp in the Ohio window was. A courtesy, a warmth aimed at the street. I am home, all's well. Somewhere down the block a screen door bangs, one last time, and someone laughs, and a sprinkler ticks around its circle, and you stand a moment in your doorway in the blue dusk with the door wide open behind you. Queen of the mildest kingdom the American door has ever known. You do not lock up. Of course you don't. This is that kind of place. Ask anyone. It's the kind of place people move to specifically because it's that kind of place, which is, if you listen closely, a strange thing for a whole civilization to need to keep saying out loud. The old town never said it. The old town never had to. Its safety was a fact, like the creek. Here it's a claim, printed in the developer's brochure, repeated over card tables, believed absolutely and checked never. And a claim, unlike a fact, is a thing you can wake one morning and find has been quietly withdrawn. 2 years from this dusk, and 1,700 miles west of it, in wheat country that looks like the moral opposite of everything dangerous. A Kansas River town of 270 people. The kind of place this street thinks it's imitating. A prosperous farmer is going to go to bed one November night in a house he has never once locked, in a town where nobody could remember anyone ever needing to. His name is real. The date is real. And I want you to hold your breath a little as we go, because this is the chapter where the story stops being about hardware. It's Sunday morning, November 15th, 1959, and you are standing in the kitchen of a house on the west side of Garden City, Kansas, 7 miles from the village of Holcomb, with a coffee cup halfway to your mouth, listening to the telephone ring in a way a telephone should not ring on a Sunday. You're 44, wheat country born. Your husband farms and your boy plays basketball against the Holcomb kids. And out here the horizon is so flat and so far that you can watch a car coming for 5 minutes before it reaches you, which is, if you think about it, its own kind of latch string. Nothing approaches unseen. Nothing ever has. When you answer the phone, it's your sister-in-law, and her voice is wrong in the first syllable, and what she says in pieces between silences is that Herb Clutter and his family have been found in their house. All 4 of them, shot, tied, sometime in the night, while the town around them slept with its doors unlocked, because that is how everyone sleeps here, because this is that kind of place. Herb Clutter. You have to put the cup down. Not a stranger in a headline. Herbert Clutter, 48 years old, River Valley Farm, one of the best-known farmers in Finney County. 4-H, the church board, the kind of man banks photograph for calendars. His wife, Bonnie. Nancy, 16, the girl half the county's boys were sweet on. Kenyon, 15, and no one heard anything and no one saw anything, and this is the piece that will not sit down in your mind, the piece that will not sit down in anyone's mind for months. Nothing, at first look, was even taken. The house wasn't ransacked for silver. The thing subtracted from that house was something else, and every farm family on the high plains feels it go. I will keep the record straight, as promised, because this one has a book wrapped around it and the book has its own gravity. What was found, what was done, the dates, those are court record. 2 men out on parole from the Kansas penitentiary had driven 400 miles across the state on the strength of a cellmate's story that Herb Clutter kept a safe full of cash in that house. There was no safe. Herb Clutter famously wrote checks. He carried almost no cash on principle. The men took perhaps $40 or $50, a portable radio, a pair of binoculars, and 4 lives, and drove away, and were caught 6 weeks later, at the end of December 1959, in Las Vegas, tried in Garden City in March of 1960, the courthouse 3 blocks from this kitchen, convicted and hanged at the state penitentiary at Lansing in April of 1965. Those are the facts, and notice, because it matters to tonight's story, what the facts make of the old geometry. These were strangers from 400 miles away, delivered by highway in a single night, aimed at one unlocked farmhouse by nothing but a rumour of money. The automobile chapter and the stranger chapter arriving at the same door on the same night, with the porch light off. But it's the next 2 weeks I brought you here to stand in, because what happens to Holcomb and Garden City in the next 2 weeks is the entire last act of tonight's mystery, performed early, in miniature, by 2,000 people. A preview, though nobody here can know it, of what the whole country will do in the decade ahead. First, the locks. Within days, and this is documented, reported at the time and confirmed by everyone who ever studied that November, the hardware stores of Garden City all but sell out of locks and bolts. Lines at the counters, men buying deadbolts for houses that have never had a working key found. Farm wives asking for window latches, for hasps, for anything with a bolt in it. The man at the hardware counter, the papers quoted his kind up and down the plains that winter, says people are buying locks who never owned one in their lives. Some don't even know what to ask for. They just say, whatever keeps a door shut. Porch lights burn all night now. streets of them, and mark the object, because you've followed that light all the way from a lamp in an Ohio window. The same bulb, the same socket, and between one Sunday and the next its meaning has flipped from I am home, come in if you need help, to I am awake, I am watching, stay away. Nobody legislated that. Nobody even said it out loud. 2,000 porch lights changed languages in a week. Second, and this is the finding that should keep you up tonight, except that I intend to put you to sleep anyway. The fear did not point outward. The writer will fix this in print later, but the town knows it now, this month, in its skin. With the killers unknown and the roads open in every direction, what the people of Holcombe and Garden City find themselves fearing, in their own words, is each other. It had to be somebody who knew the house, people whisper. Somebody who knew Herb's habits, the layout, which door. Neighbours of 30 years look at each other across fence lines with the new sick arithmetic running behind their eyes. Old friends stop dropping by unannounced, because unannounced has stopped being a word for warmth. The sheriff's office drowns in tips, and the tips name local men. That is what the death of trust actually looks like when it happens fast, in a real town, on a real November. Not a wall going up against the wild dark outside, but a hairline crack running through every relationship inside. Because trust of the old kind was never really about believing bad men didn't exist. It was about believing you knew who everyone was. One unsolved night broke that belief, and with it broken, every known face became, for 6 weeks, a possible stranger. The stranger wasn't at the edge of town anymore. He was potentially wearing your neighbour's coat. When the arrests finally come at year's end and the killers turn out to be exactly what the town had prayed for, outsiders, drifters, nobody's cousin, the relief in Finney County is almost chemical. But the locks stay on the doors. Locks do not read the news. Once installed, they only ever ask their one question, night after night, forever. You go to the funeral, everyone goes, 1,000 people, the church loudspeaker to the crowd outside on a freezing Wednesday. And that night, back home, your husband, who has not said much all week, takes the flashlight and goes out to the porch and studies the front door of the house his grandfather built, and comes back in and says quietly that he'll pick something up in town. And you, standing at the sink, hear yourself say the sentence being said that same week in 1,000 kitchens across the plains, the sentence that is the sound of an age ending softly. Well, it can't hurt, it can't hurt. No panic, no speeches. Just a farm couple, a flashlight, and a bolt. And the golden age of the unlocked American door, which was real, and which was also always a bet about the size of the world, quietly settled up and closed its account, one kitchen at a time. Now pulled back from Kansas because the 60s are starting, and what Finney County did in 2 weeks, the nation is about to do in 15 years. Here are the numbers, and I'll handle them the way I promised, both hands open. The FBI's Uniform Crime Reports, the National Ledger of Crimes reported to police kept since 1930, show this. Between 1960 and 1975, the recorded rate of violent crime in the United States roughly tripled. Burglary, the crime of the door itself, roughly tripled as well. By 1980, the recorded burglary rate stands near its all-time American peak, better than 3 million break-ins reported in a single year. Now the honest asterisks, because they matter, and almost nobody ever gives them to you. Those are reported crimes. As the 60s went on, more Americans had telephones to report with, more insurance policies that required a police report, and more police departments with better paperwork. So some real fraction of that terrifying curve is the measurement improving, not just the world worsening. When the government finally started asking households directly in the annual victimization surveys begun in 1973, it found roughly half of serious crime never reached police blotters at all. So, was the rise real? Yes, every honest reconstruction says so. The cities in particular got genuinely, measurably more dangerous, and the young, enormous baby boom generation moving through its high crime years is part of the arithmetic. Was the rise exactly the tripling on the chart? Almost certainly not. The true multiple is softer, and no one alive can give it to you to the decimal. Both of those sentences are true. A country can be right that things are getting worse and still be reacting to a curve steeper than the truth. Keep both in your hands. That's the deal tonight. And then there is the machine under the doily, whose 8 years are up. In September 1963, the network Evening News expands from 15 minutes to 30, and television discovers what the Trump-era editors discovered was zinc. Fear holds an audience. Through the 60s, the living room screen delivers the decade's violence into every kitchen in the country at dinner time. Assassinations, burning cities, and fill in the local broadcast night after night. Crime, crime, crime. Each incident real, each one somewhere. All of them arriving here in the corner of the room wearing the intimacy of a guest. 1964 gives the age its grim parable. A young woman named Kitty Genovese is murdered in Queens, and the story the whole country learns, 38 witnesses watched and did nothing, becomes the sermon of the era, proof that the city's crowds had become a wilderness. And here the honesty rule earns its keep one more time. Decades later, careful reconstruction showed that story was badly overdrawn. Far fewer people saw anything, some did call. One neighbour ran to her. The murder was real. The parable was manufactured. But the parable is what America believed, and what it built with. By 1965, the man who wrote the sermon's Kansas verses arrives too. Truman Capote's account of the Clutter killings runs in the New Yorker that fall and lands as a book, In Cold Blood, in January 1966, an immediate colossal bestseller, one of the most read true stories of the century, and its opening pages perform for every reader in America exactly the operation this chapter has been describing. Here is a town where no one locks the doors. Here is what happened anyway. The unlocked farmhouse, for 3 centuries this country's plainest emblem of everything safe, is now in the national imagination the scene of the crime. What does a nation do with a feeling that size? It does what Garden City did. It goes to the hardware store. The 60s and 70s are the deadbolt's decades. The plain 1-inch throw of steel, no springs, no slant, the bolt that must be turned and cannot be slipped, and it conquers the American door the way the cylinder once conquered the American lock. The locksmith trade booms. Apartment doors sprout chains, peepholes, second locks, third locks. New Yorkers of the 70s joke grimly that the door of a city apartment reads top to bottom like a rap sheet. And then the quiet institutions arrive to make it permanent, because this is how a panic becomes a standard. Insurance companies begin crediting premiums for deadbolts and charging for their absence. The hardware industry publishes its first formal performance grades for locks in the 1970s. Grade 1, Grade 2, Grade 3. The strength of your door now a number on a national scale. City after city, beginning in the late 60s and spreading through the 70s, writes minimum security ordinances into its building codes. New construction required by law to hang deadbolts with a full 1-inch throw, strike plates with screws long enough to bite the stud. Read that again, because it is the quiet end of a very long road. In the country of the latch-string, it is now, in a growing number of American cities, illegal to build a house that cannot lock properly. An architect named Oscar Newman gives the age its theory in 1972. Defensible space. The idea that safety must now be designed, engineered into sightlines and thresholds. And note what that book is, structurally. The town's dead system of eyes on the street, reinvented as a construction specification. What Ohio did with Mrs. Harmon, America will now attempt with floor plans. By 1980, it's done. These surveys of that era, and by now there are shelves of them. Fear of crime has become one of the most studied feelings in America. Find substantial majorities of Americans locking their doors routinely, day and night, and roughly 4 in 10 telling pollsters they are highly fearful of violent crime. The elderly, statistically the least victimized, are among the most afraid, which tells you exactly how much of the fear was carried by the screen rather than the street. Children of 1980 are raised on stranger danger, the way children of 1880 were raised on scripture. The key is on the ring is in every pocket. The click at dusk is as unconscious as a heartbeat. Nobody decides anymore. That's the definition of the end of the story. The moment nobody decides. In 1755, the string was a choice, morning and night. In 1980, the bolt is a reflex, and a house left unlocked is what a locked house was in 1843. A deviation requiring an explanation. Somewhere in those same years, your grandmother, whichever kitchen she stood in, turned her own key and began saying the sentence this whole night grew from, "We never used to lock our doors." And now you know the strange thing you're going to do with that sentence, which is believe her. She wasn't wrong. She was standing at the end of a 300-year story, remembering its middle, mourning it honestly. She just couldn't see the shape of the whole thing from where she stood. You can. Come up here, one last climb. We've earned the high ground, you and I. And let's look at the whole road at once, from the clearing to the cul-de-sac, before I take you down gently into the dark and put you to sleep. Stand here, above the whole 300 years, and let the eye travel it like a river seen from a ridge. The clearing in Pennsylvania, the string swaying gently out of its bored hole. The Ohio street, 40 unlocked doors in the moonlight. The tenement stairwell, iron answering iron up 5 flights of dark. The Illinois porch and the man with the bedroll. The Indiana square filling with unknown sedans. The potato field kingdom of banging screen doors. The 2,000 porch lights of Finney County snapping on in one November week. And now, at last, from up here, you can see the answers to the question we packed for this trip. When did the trust disappear? And what was it actually the thing that disappeared? Start with what it wasn't, because we've earned the right to say it plainly. It was not innocence, and it was not virtue. The unlocked America was never a country of better hearts. It hanged thieves, feuded, gossiped viciously, and kept a loaded long gun over the very door it left open. And the lock was never the child of the modern age. You watched a chest lock ride over the ocean in the 1700s, watched a rusted key stand in a door in 1843, watched the poorest rooms in Manhattan triple bolted in 1868. The lock is 4,000 years old. America never lacked locks. What the unlocked America had, the actual substance of the thing your grandmother was remembering, was a machine for making locks unnecessary. And the machine had 3 moving parts, and you have now watched each one of them break in its own century. The first part was scarcity of strangers. In the clearing, the unknown human was so rare he was treasure. News, labour, company, priced too high to fear. The railroad cracked that part in the 1870s, when strangers became countless. The automobile finished it in the 1920s, when strangers became traffic, and the town's ancient reflex of attention, the tavern keeper's questions, the oyster coating its grit, simply switched off, overloaded forever. Not one American in 100 decided to stop noticing strangers. The volume decided. The second part was the permanence of names. In the town, no one could walk away from their own reputation, and so reputation could stand guard over every door. The lock with 900 moving parts armed day and night. The city broke that part almost casually by offering to anyone who could pay the train fare the one commodity the town could never stock: anonymity. And when the city's answer to its own invention, trust with the people taken out, 5 brass pins in a little cold cylinder, turned out to be manufacturable by the million, the country had, ready and waiting on every hardware shelf, a complete replacement for being known. It waited there for decades, mostly unused, a technology ahead of its demand. The door learned to lock before the neighbourhood learned to be afraid. That is the single most important sentence of this whole night, so let me hang it up where you can see it. The hardware came first, silent and patient, and the fear was fitted to it afterward, the way a key is fitted to a lock. The third part was the boundedness of bad news. Fear used to be local because information was local. A horse thief 2 counties over was a story you might hear at threshing, softened by distance and summer. The telegraph broke the distance. The mass newspaper learned that the tramp sells papers, and the television, the friendly machine under the doily, finished the job by delivering every dark thing in a continental nation into every kitchen at dinner time, with faces. And so the feeling of danger came unhooked from the fact of danger, and has never been hooked back on since. Remember the elderly of 1980, the least harmed and the most afraid. When people tell you fear was mass-produced in this country, that is not a metaphor. It had factories, it had distribution, it had sponsors, and the crime itself? Here is the honest ledger, closed out the way I promised. Yes, the danger was real, at times and places acutely real. The frontier's raiding years, the city's riot summers, and above all the genuine statistically solid rise of the 1960s and 70s, whatever its exact multiple. I will not tell you America locked its doors against nothing. That would be a prettier story and a false one. But look at the order of operations, from up here where the whole river is visible at once. The strangers arrived generations before the crime wave. The locks were bought, hung, and waiting before the fear. The fear, when it came, was amplified beyond the facts by every instrument that profited from amplifying it. And the trust, this is the finding, the bottom of the whole excavation. The trust did not die first in the human heart and then empty the porches. It went the other way around. The conditions died first. The scarcity, the permanence, the boundedness, dismantled one by rails and cylinders and highways and broadcast towers, none of which was ever aimed at trust, all of which hit it. The heart hung on for decades after the machinery was gone. That was the suburbs, trust's beautiful Indian summer, an unlocked door standing open on pure memory and resemblance. And when the shock finally came, in a Kansas November and a decade of sirens, the heart wasn't abandoning trust. It was noticing all at once, 20 years late, that trust's foundations had already been carried off. Nobody betrayed the old world. Everybody bought a car. So, when did the trust disappear? You can now see why every simple answer you've ever heard is wrong, and what the true answer looks like. Not 1959. Holcomb was the noticing, not the dying. Not the 60s. The 60s were the reckoning of accounts long since emptied. If you want dates, the honest ones are these. The trust began leaving in 1869, with the golden spike that wired every trusting town into the national circuit of strangers. It was structurally finished by about 1930, when the automobile had made anonymity universal even on Main Street, and it was pronounced dead between 1959 and 1980, in a funeral that mistook itself for a murder. 3 dates, one for each moving part. Your grandmother stood inside the long, warm afterglow, and here is the last kindness of the whole story. The afterglow was real. The suppers on unwatched tables, the milkman in the kitchen, the keys rusting in their locks. None of that is myth. The myth is only the frame around it. The belief that it ended because people stopped being good. People never stopped being good or bad. People stayed exactly people. The whole 300 years. What changed was the size of the world their doors had to answer for. A door is a question a house asks about the world. I told you that in the clearing, and the answer was never really about the neighbours. It was about the radius. Come in was always a bet that the world within reach of your door was small enough to know. The bet was sound for 2 centuries. Then the reach grew, 400 miles a night, a continent a day, and the same honest people, running the same honest arithmetic their great-grandmothers ran at the cabin door, got the other answer. And the guns we planted at the start of the evening, look, from up here you can watch every one of them finish firing. The chest at the foot of the bed, the iron-strapped one with a key warmed on a breastbone, it never went away. It became the house. That's the quiet punchline of the whole 3 centuries. The frontier locked the chest and left the door open, and all we did in the end was promote the door to chest. The whole house now holds the irreplaceable things, and the cylinder on the front door is the same old chest lock grown to fit. The key on its ribbon became the key on the ring in your pocket. In every pocket, the most carried object in American life after money. The key under the mat, the 50s sweet, guilty compromise, died of its own fame and was reborn as the code on the lockbox, the number texted to a house-sitter. Their hiding places changed. The need to leave a way in for the trusted never did. The lamp in the window became the porch light, became the motion sensor flood. 3 bulbs, 1 socket, 3 centuries, the wattage rising as the welcome fell. And the latch string itself, the leather thong that started everything, survives now only as a fossil in the language, in the speech of people who've never seen a latch bar. When someone tells you their door is always open, that is the string still hanging there, 200 years out of its hole, swaying in a sentence. One more thing from this height, because from up here you can see past 1980, down into the country where you actually live. The story didn't stop. It curled. The video doorbell on the suburban porch, the little lens that watches the street and files what it sees, look at it from this ridge and laugh softly, because you know exactly who that is. It's Mrs. Harmon, back at her kitchen window after a century away, reading the clothesline again. The neighbourhood app with its alerts about a stranger on a bay horse. Forgive me, an unfamiliar car. That's the town swallowing grit again. The old immune system rebooted in silicon. The gated development is the stockade. The smart lock that texts you when your child gets home is the tavern keeper, taking names at the threshold. Having dismantled over 3 centuries every system by which people watched over one another, the country is now busily rebuilding all of them out of cameras and code. Surveillance without membership, the town's eye without the town. And whether that is a homecoming or a haunting is a question I will leave sitting up here on the ridge, because it is not a question that helps anyone sleep, and sleep is where you and I are going now. Down the hill then, slowly. The light's nearly gone, and there's only one door left in this whole long story that we haven't stood in front of, and it's yours. You know the one. You passed it tonight without looking at it, the way you pass it every night, because it is the most looked past object you own. But you know it blind, the way the seamstress knew her stairwell. You know the sound it makes closing. Every door in every home you've ever lived in has had its own voice, and you could pick this one's out of 100. That particular soft chunk of wood meeting frame, and then, after it, the small bright snick of the latch. You know the temperature of the knob in winter. You know exactly how much shoulder it wants in humid weather, and somewhere on that door or beside it is the bolt. And here, at the very end of everything, I want to do something with that bolt. I want to give it back to you changed. Because think of what you actually do last thing every night of your life. The lights go off one room at a time, the taps are checked, and then, be honest, you do it even when you remember having done it. You check the door. Maybe you walk to it and press the thumb turn even though you know. Maybe you only listen for the memory of the click. Some people rattle the knob once, twice, a private number. Nearly everyone alive in this country does some version of it every night, and nearly everyone thinks of it, when they think of it at all, as a small dull chore of the fearful age. It isn't. You know better now. You've walked 300 years tonight, and you can see what that gesture actually is. It's the string drawn in through the bored hole with that small leather whisper, the latch bar settling into its notch. It's the fire banked and the lamp trimmed low in an Ohio window. It's 2 bolts and a chair in a tenement dark, the ribbon lifted over a head, the key warm from a day against skin. It's the night circuit of the farm wife, the porch bulb, the flashlight on a Kansas porch. Every night, the last human act of your day, you perform the accumulated bedtime ritual of everyone who ever slept behind an American door. The whole lineage compressed into one twist of your wrist. The lock is not the monument to the trust that died. The lock is where the ritual went to live. Houses have always needed a way to say the day is over now. For millennia it was covering the fire. Curfew, remember, couvre-feu, the bell that told the whole town to bank its hearths. And when the fires went out of houses for good, the ritual moved into the door. The click is your curfew bell, rung for an audience of 1. So tonight, right now if you like, I'll still be here. Let it be that. If you've already locked up, good. The ritual is done, the fire is covered, and you can let the knowledge of it sit in your chest like the warm weight of a key on a ribbon. If you haven't, or if you're the kind who needs to check, and after 3 centuries of this story, who could blame you? Then go, unhurried, bare feet on the floor like a woman crossing a cabin in the dark, and do the oldest thing. Put your hand on the door. Feel it stand. It's a good door. It has been doing this all day and all the days before its one silent job, and it does not need you to be afraid in order to do it. That's the part the noisy decades got wrong. The bolt works exactly the same whether it's thrown in fear or thrown in peace. Same steel, same throw, so throw it in peace. Press the thumb turn slowly and listen. That small, final, competent sound, the sound of 5 little brass pins agreeing with a dead man from Stamford, Connecticut, across a century and a half, and then let your hand fall and let the day be over, because it is. The house is closed, the circle is drawn, somewhere down inside the walls the same night that held the clearing holds you. And notice, one last time, the dog. Yours, if you have one, already flat on the floor somewhere between your bed and that door, because 10,000 years of the bargain still hold, and he still takes the night watch without being asked. Or the neighbourhood's dogs, distant, trading one lazy remark across the yards and going quiet. There has been a dog lying against a door through every chapter of this night. The hackles at the cabin, the growl on the Illinois porch, the scarred 4 panels we started with. And there is one now, somewhere near you, and his ears are doing right this moment what the town's eyes once did. Some parts of the old system were never dismantled. Some parts just moved closer to the bed. The house is quiet now. Listen to it. The refrigerator murmuring its one long thought. A car passing, someone else's, going somewhere that is none of your business. And feel how that phrase has softened. None of your business. How the stranger rolling past your window at night is not a hole in your safety, but just the world. Still awake. Still moving. The way the freight moved past 10,000 farmhouses full of sleeping families who by morning had come to no harm at all. Almost all of them, almost every night for 300 years, came to no harm at all. That is the truest statistic of this whole night. The one that never made a headline, the overwhelming, monotonous, unreported safety of almost everyone, almost, always. The papers kept the fear, nobody kept the ledger of the quiet nights. You're lying in the middle of that ledger right now, one more unrecorded entry, one more door that held. You're locked enough, watched enough, known enough. You have a door and a bolt and a warm place on the inside of both. That's more than the woman in the clearing had, and she slept. That's more than the seamstress had, and she slept, 4 flights up, 8 feet from strangers. It's enough. It has always, in the end, been enough. And the check-in is done now. That's the gift of the ritual. It ends. The string is in. You don't have to hold the door holds. You don't have to listen, the dog listens. You don't have to know who's out there. The night is full of people you don't know, and nearly every one of them is only trying to get home, the same as you, the same as the peddler on the dark road, the same as the man with the bedroll counting boxcars, the same as everyone who was ever out late in America wishing for a lit window. Let them all get home. Let every door on your street do its silent work. Let the porch lights burn for whatever each of them means now. Welcome, warning, habit, hope. It doesn't matter tonight. They're all just lights now, all just small human fires held up against the same old dark. Tomorrow there will be doors again. Tomorrow there will be keys and errands and strangers, and the whole loud world with its whole long reach. Tomorrow you can worry if you want to about cameras and codes and what the neighbourhood is becoming. Tomorrow. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this. A closed door, a quiet house, a body finally allowed to be heavy. Feel how heavy actually. Feel where you're lying. The particular give of your own bed, which your body knows the way a thumb knows the worn place on a latch bar, the way feet know the count of a dark stairwell. 13 to the turn, 11 to the landing. You could walk your own home blind, and that knowledge is old, older than locks, the oldest safety there is, the animal certainty of the den. Every sleeper in this whole story had it. The woman in the cabin had it, 6 steps across split logs. The merchant's wife had it, the banister smooth under her palm. The seamstress had it in a building full of strangers. The farm wife had it with a bolt thrown at 3 in the afternoon. The young mother had it in a house identical to 900 others. Identical to everyone but her, because her feet knew where the floor creaked, and that made it hers, and that made it safe in the way that matters last, the way that has nothing to do with hardware at all. You have it now. You have. You are the current tenant of the oldest room there is, and breathe once slowly for each of them. You can spare 5 breaths. 1 for the clearing, where the mist stood in the stumps like flood water, and the string hung out because a stranger was worth more than the fear of him. 1 for the town, where 900 people were each other's lock, and no one could fall without being seen, and no one could be seen without being caught falling. 1 for the city, for every soul who ever climbed a black stairwell to a bolted room and made it home anyway, and slept, and rose, and worked, and was never once known, and mattered anyway. 1 for all the men on all the roads, the peddler, the tramp, the salesman with his sample case, everyone who ever stood at a strange door at dusk, hat in hand, hoping the old arithmetic still held, and 1 for the porches, all of them, the whole 300-year republic of porches with their lamps and their bulbs and their dogs and their women reading the street. Breathe that one out slowly, and let them all go dark together, gently, street by street, century by century, the way they actually went. Not in fear, in the end, but in bedtime. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took a woman in a 1-room cabin at the edge of the world, with a string drawn in and the children breathing and the fire settling into its embers. Let the world fade the way Main Street faded from a dark upstairs window. 40 open doors standing easy in the moonlight. Let the noise quiet the way a tenement quiets, bolt by bolt, floor by floor, until even the cigar-maker's cough gives up. Let the day's faces blur the way faces on a crowded square blur. All those strangers you owe nothing tonight but the old courtesy of the road. Safe travels, whoever you are, and a lit window at the end. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop, the way a town stops noticing a stranger, the way a key stops being felt against the skin, the way a rumour dies for lack of a listener, the way a phrase outlives its own machinery and turns into a lullaby. The latch-string is out. The latch-string is out. The latch-string is out. Centuries will pass. The doors you know will change beyond recognition. The brass key will follow the latch-string into the museums and the figures of speech. The bolt will become a signal. The signal will become a whisper between machines, and children will someday find a 5-pin cylinder in a drawer and not know which way it turned. But people will still pause at their doors, last thing at night, still press a hand flat against the wood, some of them, for no reason they could name, still perform, in whatever hardware their century hands them, the same small ceremony of closing. The day is over, the circle is drawn, the ones inside are mine. Some things don't change. The closed door at nightfall doesn't change. The wish behind it, everyone safe, everyone home, everyone held, that has never changed once, not in the clearing, not on the square, not in the stairwell, not on your street tonight. The house is holding. The night is ordinary. The ledger of quiet nights is open, and your name is going into it now, the way it has 10,000 times before. 1 more unrecorded entry, 1 more door that held, One more sleeper folded into the long, unbroken, unfamous safety of almost everyone. Almost always. You've earned this rest. All the walking we did tonight, 300 years of it, you did with your eyes closed, or nearly. So finish it. Take the rest. And dream, if you can choose, of a door with the leather string hanging gently out of it, swaying a little, in a morning wind, in a clearing, where somebody is always, always welcome. Good night.